Well, President Biden is set to speak this afternoon after the Supreme Court's ruling striking down his student loan program. In a statement earlier today, he said the fight is not over. Yahoo Finance senior columnist Rick Newman is here with more on what this means for the president. And Rick, this is an issue the president campaigned on. He saw this as a political win, especially among the younger voters. How does he now make the pivot in messaging now that he's suffered this setback?
Biden, he did campaign on this, but he also, people forget this, but he himself expressed skepticism before he became president about whether the president has the authority to write off student debt just through an executive order. He said he thought that the best way to do it was by Congress passing legislation, and the Supreme Court basically agreed with him. So this ruling by the Supreme Court is not a surprise, and clearly the White House was prepared for it, and that's why we're going to get a new plan, the very same day that the Supreme Court knocks down the old plan. I think this is a messaging win for Biden, to tell you the truth, because he can say to voters, look, I tried, but we've got this crazy Donald Trump Supreme Court dominated by conservatives 6-3 that shot it down. So what you need to do, voters, is elect me again in 2024, make sure Democrats retake control of Congress so we can pass this legislation. And I think that is a pretty good pitch because voters actually like the Biden plan. And I want to remind people that Biden crafted this plan very carefully. He never supported complete student debt forgiveness, as Bernie Sanders did. He thought $50,000 in forgiveness was too much. That was Elizabeth Warren's plan back in 2020. And he came up with this plan. Let's make it $10,000 plus an extra $10,000 for Pell Grant borrowers who qualify. And I think the way they got to those numbers was they just looked at the polls and they found the sweet spot in the amount of debt relief that Americans seem to support. And it's right around those numbers. So the Supreme Court, as it has done on other issues, most notably abortion rights, has ruled against public opinion here. So I think Biden is going to have a pretty good case to go to voters and say, let's do this the right way so that the Supreme Court can't undo it again.
So Biden could use this to his advantage here as we look ahead to 2024. But Rick, what about the economic implications of this? Millions of Americans are now going to have to be paying their student debt on a monthly basis. What does that mean then for the economy?
At a macroeconomic level, I don't think it's that big of a deal. It also means that this was going to cost the government. Remember, the government now writes almost all student loans. So by forgiving this amount of principal for more than 40 million borrowers, that was going to cost the government something like $400 billion, which means it was going to push up the deficit or the national debt by $400 billion. So that is $400 billion in deficit spending we are not going to have. So that, in a way, takes some borrowing out of the market. Now, you're right that borrowers who may have been expecting they were going to get this relief, they might find themselves in a hole. There are certainly some borrowers who feel overburdened as it is just because they got too much debt and they can't pay it off. They're not making enough income to pay it off. I would like to remind people that there is another plan that Biden has been working on, which is to lower the amount of you have to pay back based on your income. So there's a lot going on here. Hope is not completely lost for student borrowers. And if you really think this is an important issue, pay attention to what the candidates are saying in 2024, because I don't think this is going away as a political issue.
Rick, finally, when you round out the week, the decisions we got from the Supreme Court certainly point to the conservative bend in really putting their mark on these decisions. To what extent do you think these decisions, yesterday's overturning of affirmative action, this particular one on student loans, is it going to have the effect of maybe, exciting the Democratic base? Is it going to, is it sort of going to be like what we saw last year with the Dobbs decision going into 2024?
I think when you look at, we do have this case study from 2022 when they overturned Roe versus Wade. Did that move the needle in terms of the 2022 midterm elections? And there's a good case that, yes, it did move the needle. Again, the thing to keep in mind about these controversial cases is that with abortion rights, with the new ruling this year that businesses can decline to serve gay customers if they don't agree with that, and with this student debt decision, The Supreme Court is out of step with public opinion. They are invalidating programs that a majority of Americans basically agree with. It's a little dicier on affirmative action, which is a little more controversial. But Biden had the case to make in 2022. Look, the Supreme Court is doing stuff that most Americans don't want them to do. And Democrats overperformed in the midterm elections. They lost fewer seats in the House than expected. And importantly, they kept control of the Senate when it looked like they would lose it. So I think it is reasonable to think that if Biden is the candidate in 2024 and he plays this correctly, yeah, this could be a tailwind for Democrats.
Certainly going to be interesting to watch. Rick Newman, as always, thanks so much.